Belle Meade Reserve could be about to disappear forever. So is it good enough that you should go out and try to get a bottle right now? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that's right, today we are talking about Belle Meade Bourbon. Now, if you've been paying attention to the whiskey community, WhiskeyTube in particular, you'll know this has kind of been a hot topic recently. I first heard the reports from Trev Wilson over on The Bourbon Wrench. If you haven't checked out his channel, highly recommend you go over. He's got great content. He basically first released a video saying that Belle Meade was going to be discontinued. There were a couple of articles written about it too. He then released a second video kind of rolling back that claim a little bit and saying it's not going to be totally discontinued. So essentially from what research I've done and from what I can gather, here's the story. So Belle Meade has a couple of different products. There's this reserve version, which we're talking about today, and there's I think like a 93 proofer version. Both of those are being taken out of the national market. So they won't be entirely gone, but they will only be available in Tennessee. It's unclear whether or not they will be a distillery-only product at this point, but chances are that's probably pretty likely. So why is this happening? Why is Belle Meade going away when it's pretty much a well-regarded bourbon? For the most part, it's because the Nelson Greenbrier Distillery, which is what originally sourced the stuff from MGP to create this product, and MGP is now Ross and Squibb, and they're still sourcing that stuff to create Belle Meade. But Nelson Greenbrier Distillery is interested in sort of building their own brand more, and they're about to release their own distillate. It's going to be under the name Nelson Brothers or Nelson Bros. So you're going to be getting another option from this distillery under their own distillate. There's even going to be a reserve option just like this bottle. It's going to be, I think, 107.8 proof. For the most part, people were sort of unaware that Belle Meade was even under that distillery's umbrella, and there's not really that strong an association there. So it makes a lot of sense that Nelson Bros is going to come out with their own stuff, promote it under their own brand, and that's going to be the one that they're going to get out to major markets. Really interesting story there. I think it was back in 2006 that the Nelson brothers themselves were visiting a local butcher shop down in Tennessee, and as they were driving back home from there, they stumbled across this old distillery. They get out on the side of the road, basically look at the sign or plaque denoting that it used to be their old family distillery. And right then and there, they basically got inspired to resurrect it, bring it back. So they accomplished that feat pretty quickly, started sourcing from MGP to create some really nice products that people got behind, and now they're ready to release their own distillate. All right, so all that being said, the question here today really is this Belle Meade Reserve Bourbon something you have to go out and try to get right now while you can still get your hands on it? Stats on this bottle itself. We are looking at a 108.3 proof bourbon, so not quite barrel proof, but relatively high proof. These used to be a cask strength offering, then transitioned to a small batch at this 108.3 proof. I think all the cask strength ones were usually between like 110 and 120. Some people said they were really phenomenal. It was a single barrel kind of thing, so some bottles were a lot better than others. This is now a small batch, more standard, and people say a lot of good things about it. Mash bill on this is 64% corn, 30% rye, and 6% malted barley. So as MGP is known for, we are looking at a pretty high rye mash bill here for a bourbon, and something that's probably going to have a good deal of spice and kick to it. In terms of age, we are looking at something that doesn't have an age statement, but most people say that it's somewhere between 7 and 11 years old. And then last but not least, we are looking at price. Price here is right around $60 for MSRP. I got this bottle for $65. You can see it as high as $70 or $75, but it fits pretty nicely in that $60 to $70 range. Real quick here before we get into the nose, palate, and finish, do just want to ask that if you are liking all the content coming out of the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're liking this video, hit that like button. Put in the comments below what kind of videos you guys want to see. All that really just genuinely helps me grow the channel and helps me know what specific kind of content to keep creating for you guys. Okay, let's get into the nose palate and finish here on Belle Meade Reserve. On the nose. Okay, so there's definitely a rye presence. It's got this fresh spiciness to it is the first thing I notice. But there's a good like caramel sweetness, vanilla sweetness, and an oakiness to it. Sort of that sweeter oak, which is really nice. There's a little punch of ethanol, so I can feel a little bit of like a burn or a sting as some of the fumes get up into my nose, but for 108 and 30% rye, I'm not expecting that, you know? There is like a subtle earthy, or maybe even like pine tree mint kind of quality from that rye, I think. So I get this good like fresh, minty, piney quality, but it's not super prominent. It's sort of just folded in underneath everything. And then it's a good, rich, dark, sweet bourbon otherwise. So really nice nose, inviting, spicy, fresh, and makes me want to take a sip. So let's get into the palate here. Cheers, everybody. Okay, so on that, first thing I noticed was some like really good, dark wood sugars, brown sugar, caramel note. There is that allspice, baking spice punch to it. And then as it lingers on the tongue, it transitions to a little bit more of an oaky, maybe red apple or cherry kind of red fruit finish. So a good progression there. That was my first sip of the day, so hit me pretty hard there. I'm gonna go back in for a second sip, but already showing some really nice flavors. Cheers, everybody. Yeah, man, it's really nice. Came to mind there was like cherry pie with some like cinnamon on top. This nice cherry note sort of sitting at the core of it with this like bready rye kind of wrapped around it, and then good cinnamon and spice kick that really sort of envelop it about halfway through the experience. And then it kind of cools down a little bit and goes back to a little bit more cherry apple note. Really nice. Not so much the minty freshness on the palate as there was on the nose. That sort of gives way to a darker, richer bourbon on the palate. All right, let's go back in for one last sip here. We'll really focus on the finish and evaluate that. Cheers, everybody. All right, that one was interesting. More oak and brown sugar to start. And then I noticed this transition to more of like almost like a sour apple, like a green apple that time, rather than the bright red cherry note. I got more of like a sour green apple. And that lingers on the finish with vanilla, a little touch of oak, and good spice like cinnamon baking spice. But I do get this like sour green apple note, which is really, really nice, like a Granny Smith, very juicy, almost like apple pie or cherry pie, you know, with some apples on it. Nice, fruity, bready, spicy bourbon. Mouthfeel on it is pretty good. Not the creamiest thing I've ever had, but certainly coats the tongue well. And it does linger for quite some time. Maybe one of the best things about this experience is that because it's got such a good rye, spicy kick, what lingers is like this heat sensation, both, you know, Kentucky hug going down the chest, but in your mouth, it kind of just simmers for a while, which is really nice. Okay, so overall, what are my thoughts on Belle Meade Reserve Bourbon, 108.3 proof whiskey? I think it is really, really good complexity, good mouthfeel, good solid progression of flavors. A richer bourbon on the palate. On the nose, it's a little bit fresher and brighter, and on the palate, it's darker and richer, which is a nice progression. Really cool flavors, that like green apple, that cherry fruitiness coming through, And then of course, because it's got that high rye, it's got good lingering heat and spice to it. Really nice baking spices on this experience here. I'd say I'm happy that I paid $65 for this. I'd pay $70 for it, not really with any issue. I think it's worth $70 to $75. Really nice if you can get it for $60 or $65. My advice would be, if you can, if you know it's somewhat available in your area right now, do go out and get yourself a bottle of this. I do recommend that. Keep it around, sip on it slowly, make sure you have one so that when it gets pulled out of the market, you know, you've got something that most other people aren't going to be able to get their hands on. So I'm going to consider this one hutch worthy for sure. Glad I got a bottle before it's too late. It is sad that this is being pulled out of the national market, but hopefully Nelson Bros does great things with their own distillate, and I'll be looking forward to getting into that a bit too. All right, everybody, I think that about wraps up everything here on Belle Meade Reserve Bourbon. Get it now before you have to drive all the way to Tennessee to get it. Really nice bottle. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.